Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, thank you.
Thank you for coming on to the show. Okay, let's get right into it.
All right.
So you went to University of California, Berkeley.
Yes, graduated from there.
And did you get into film at that point in your life, or?
No, at that time I was in the music side of the business. I was playing in rock bands and doing, little compositions for TV shows and films, and that's how I started in the business, eventually down in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay, wonderful. And now, how many films would you say you've produced in your lifetime?
In my lifetime, well, let's see. I've done probably a dozen films that have been out there, and working with the studios on over probably 30 others. In development, various forms, scripts.
What is your favorite genre so far?
Wow, that's a tough one. I love comedies because I think, but they have to be comedies that touch and, a piece of the heart,
Have a meaning.
Have meaning, have a message so people learn something.
Okay, I was going to wait until the end of the show to ask this question, but what are you working on right now?
Right now I'm working on a kind of a coming-of-age, risky business meets hangover that we're finishing up, fun with a lot of wonderful music with some of the top DJs in the world, so that's a lot of fun.
When are we expected to see this?
The hope is summer of this coming
2015.
year. 2015.
Wonderful. So what qualities do you look for in your films? Like we were just talking about, it has to have a meaning. A film has to have a meaning. So do you want people to get something out of the film?
Me as a filmmaker, I think it's important for people to be touched when they go to the movies. Now, however they're touched, that's completely depends, each individual. But if in each of my movies, what I try to make sure that happens is there's an event, there's an idea that something makes someone look at themselves or other people's lives, and it may change them, it may not change them inexorably for the rest of their lives. That it's an event.
Okay. I want to get to the producer side of things, and then we're going to talk about the actor side of things. So I'm going to gear these questions toward producing. So why would someone choose to collaborate on and invest in a project? And let's think about the executive producer side.
Well, I think for most people who invest in movies, investors, they usually do it for a couple of reasons. One is, the film business itself seems very romantic, and special to them, and they want to get involved and have some extra, monies or want to start in that end of the business. I think that's one reason. Two, I think sometimes there's a story or a personal interest that they may, or their family may be interested in, whether it's, a baseball team or, a certain catastrophic event that has happened to them. And they get involved.
So unless you know your executive producers or anyone that wants to fund the movie, unless you know them, my question is, how would you know? How would you know if that person is vested?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's like any selling business. You don't know. Exactly. Yeah. You go out and you ask people if they want to be involved in in the film, in that film idea. As a business, and then obviously also outside as a business, more of a creative.
So when you go to people, do you take them the script or do you take them a short? Have you already produced some type of short?
It's a combination. Sometimes you go to them with ideas or presentations of what the film or the TV series might be. Other times you may be lucky enough to have a script available for them to see it. So it really depends on each situation. Investors, like anybody else in any business, want to see as much as possible.
Right.
So hopefully you have a presentation, you have a script, you might even have actors, directors, other talent involved. That's always helpful to the process because it's like anything else. It's very easy for people to say no.
Right.
You want them to say yes.
Right.
And ultimately, the more you have is always better.
Wonderful. So how do you make a project noteworthy? How do you do it? How do you make sure that it has the values that you want it to portray?
Well, there's so many wonderful values in a film. I think the most important thing it always starts with is with the story and the script. everything comes from the written word, and I think that's where it all starts. Once you have that, then ultimately it makes it a little bit easier to bring in other talent, obviously actors, directors to the mix, and ultimately investors, and or if they're not individual equity investors, the studios who eventually sell the project to.
Right.
So the most important thing is always the script, and then try to surround that script with great talent that works.
Okay. So my other question is, how does one make sure that the collaborators, the producer, the director, the actors, the executive producers, all want the same thing, that they're on the same agenda, and that they're trying to make the same movie?
Well,
how do you do that as the producer?
That's a really hard one. That's like a puzzle that is always going on, because ultimately someone brings a project. The project begins somewhere.
Right.
And that person, whether it's the producer or the director or the writer, has a vision for what that project is.
Right.
Okay? And then hopefully everyone else that comes on board afterwards believes in that project, in that vision of the project, and makes it that much better. Adds their personal touch that makes it better. It's always hard because everyone has a little bit different.
Yes, they do.
A little different.
Yes,
so everyone puts in a little salt, a little pepper to make it them. But ultimately,
do you drive the bus on that one? Do you sort of say, well, that's good, but we sort of were thinking this way? Do you talk to your actors and everyone involved about that? The director?
Yeah, certainly as a producer you do get to drive, but it also depends on the project. There are writer-directors, and if a writer-director has a vision, then ultimately, it depends which part of the process. Ultimately, in the beginning, producers are more involved with the director in creating, casting the actors and or the director. But ultimately, when a film starts, it's the director is helming it. The producer, a good producer, is there to help the director in the vision that they've put together with the writer and the director until the director has his cut. And then, of course, whether it's a studio or whether it's an individual group, then ultimately distribution helps, advertise it, market it the way it should be. But it's everyone has a vision, everyone has a little thing, but usually it's, for a film, ultimately it should be the director's vision once you've gotten to a certain point.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's one. It sounds like you're a pretty open producer then.
Yeah, I think it's important. I'm more of a creative producer, where a producer has many, many definitions.
Yes.
Ultimately, for me, I'm very creative in the sense I usually work with the writers on the script, I work with the director of the script, I work in casting. I'm obviously bringing in money sometimes, or buying or optioning books, that I think may work in the marketplace, or just things that I love that I want to see because my 15-year-old has been raving about it.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Great answers. What recommendations can you offer producers out there on finding financing for their projects?
Yeah, financing is really tough. It'd be great if everyone had $100 million to make all their films and TV shows. I think the most important thing out there is just getting your project to a place, presentation, that would have someone want to invest, not only from a creative standpoint, but from a business financial. Because ultimately, you can be creative and say, this is a great idea, a great comedy, a great drama, and it's great people, but ultimately you want to look at the back end of it. Okay, you're going to get your money back within 9 months, within 2 years, because this is made for a certain amount of money, and we believe that we can get money back from distribution or foreign or whatever investment it is to help make that presentation a little bit more palatable.
Okay, that is really good information, folks. So listen to what this experienced producer is telling us. How do you determine if someone is truly worth collaborating with, the directors and the actors?
Well, I think you always have to do your homework. Obviously, I watch a lot of films, and if there are films that I enjoy the way they were done, I'm going to always try to meet with or talk to that talent, whether they're writers, directors, actors. And ultimately, if I have a project that I think makes sense for them, I will go to them because of their work. Obviously, you never know how it is until you work with someone. Usually it is a wonderful experience, but every director is different, every actor is different. They all bring different things to the table, which is fantastic because this is such a wonderful creative community all around, the world, everything.
And this is a big networking town, so I'm sure you use your networking skills.
Yes, it is. It's a tremendous networking town.
Okay. And I think we kind of hit on this, but I want to delve into this a little bit more. How do you make people want to see your movie?
Well, hopefully you have a good movie to start that, you go in, but you never know. The audiences are you hope that they like your film once you're doing it. But ultimately, in marketing, that's usually the distribution way of doing it. But social media is really important today, so getting out there and that whole marketplace is big. Obviously, advertising is huge, whether it's TV, radio, newspaper, whatever newspapers are left. To get the word out there. And word of mouth is so huge on smaller films and in reference to bigger films as well, of people liking it. So ultimately it's about getting the word out there and doing as much publicity as you can, getting out in festivals if there are smaller films.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you believe in film festivals?
Festivals are great for smaller films because ultimately you get it out, you get a word of mouth, you get, in a sense, as we call it in the networking, spin, where people go, wow, this film is fantastic. Isn't there a chance of making it into sold and having people see it? So festivals are very important. Any publicity is important for a film once you get out there, because the more people that know about it, the more possibilities are that they will see it come to film.
Wonderful. In ensuring that your project gets the right actor, how much are you involved in selecting or casting? So I know you typically hire a casting director, but if you don't quite agree, are you involved in that process?
Well, yeah, I think most creative producers are. I'm very involved in the casting. I'm usually either calling the actors themselves or working with the casting director directly to recommend people, see the people on there at all the sessions with the director. So ultimately together, usually the director and the producer pick that. But ultimately, if the director is in love with someone, if it's one or two, you'll have reasons either way. You want to pick who's best for the project.
Have you ever been in a situation where the director was adamant on a person, but you didn't feel it was quite the right person?
Of course, I think you have that. Generally, it's split. Usually the director will win. It depends how big the director is. If it's Scorsese, if it's Spielberg, you're not winning that argument. Usually I think the director ultimately will win, but like anything else, everyone wants to do what's best for the film.
Right.
So that comes number one. You're always going to try to explain why. There may be a marketing thing, there may be a spin. And you really don't know until you're actually shooting what happens anyway. Chemistry is so important.
Yes.
You can think that someone's right for the film.
Yes.
There have been so many films that someone was supposed to play a role and they couldn't do it. And oh my God, it turned into a whole different. So it totally depends.
That's wonderful. How do you estimate the value of any given film? Popularity, let's say this film, this script is really a good script, and you think it's gonna do very well. So how do you kind of measure the value of it in the population? How do you kind of think, wow, this is gonna be a hit? Because I know a lot of people have thought their movies were going to be a hit, but they weren't. And a lot of money was dumped into the movie, and it, was pretty much a bust. So how do you kind of value the worth of a movie?
Well, I think it's ultimately the audience makes the choices, and you try to do what's best in reference to if there are films that are like yours that have done well in the past. I think that's certainly a point of view that goes on. You look at the trends in the marketplace, and people like it. People suddenly are liking comedies about families. Ultimately, the family comedies may be more geared to have a possibility of being sold.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, you have a script or a project that you think you do your best for and do the best.
Right.
But ultimately, going in there, you have to almost think 2 years ahead, because you make a film. By the time it comes out in the theaters, it's going to be a year and a half, 2 years. Right. So trends may change. So you have to kind of look at what the great story is and where you are, and where I think also where the audience is. And then from there, promote it, have publicity, and try to do what's best.
Now I know that a lot of producers are now looking at the actors' social media pages and looking at their numbers and looking at their worth and their IMDb scores. They're looking at a lot of different things. But if an actor really wanted to get involved in your project, what would you recommend?
Well, I think the most important thing for actors in most projects is work. You know, producers, directors, casting directors are looking at their work, at their reels, at their plays, individual live. They want to know what they can do, and ultimately they pick those actors for the particular films. That's the most important thing. Yes, it's great to meet with an actor. I think that's important too. I think meeting with directors and casting directors and producers is tremendously important for actors, because ultimately, like you say, the work is really important, but also meeting someone face to face also is truly important, because you get a different sense of who the actor and who the person is going to be in that chemistry.
Exactly. So, this is our last question.
No.
You've done well.
No.
Okay, so what is the worst and the best part of your job?
Wow. The worst and the best part.
We're going to end on a high note, so you tell me the best.
I think the worst part is always negotiations. You know, it's really hard. You know, you want to give everyone, you know, what they're worth, and even more so. And negotiations always is not about the creative process. It's about, oh my God, how do we do what's best for you or the film? And you're always bickering. It's never creative by any means, you know, from that end. So for me, that's the word, negotiations. Although it's fun negotiating back and forth, you know, there's some fun in it. It's not ultimately. Until you
get a yes.
Until you get a yes, it's always it's never fun.
Right.
There's no question. The best part is working with all the talent, whether they be actors or writers or directors or crew, because there's so many unbelievably talented, special people in our industry and in other industries. And when I'm there listening to them, whether it's a writer coming up with an idea, or whether it's actors saying, oh my God, let me try it this way, or if it's a cinematographer showing, oh my God, look at this light and look at this shot, it is great. It's like going to college again, and you're learning something every day, and I learn something every day from working in this business, and that's precious.
Wonderful. Well, you heard it from one of the best. Willie Kutner, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much.
And this is Sandra D. signing off from Ready, Action. Okay. That was so